Oh, that is fantabulous. That is some good stuff right there. Mm, mm. I kind of feel like everybody should be drinking coffee because it's 9 o'clock in the stupid morning. Mm. Oh yeah, that is that is good. See, unlike Kirk Cameron, I can fake drinking coffee. See? Except it's good and it's real coffee. Anyways, good morning. And welcome in to Denying Ben's Belief. I am your host, Nathaniel, and I'm doing this again. Gosh dang it. The coffee messed up my mustache, but don't worry about it. Watch other parts of the screen. I don't know. Wonder how many Funko Pops are back there. I don't. There's 128, by the way. I counted them the other day. So it's 11 o'clock here. Look, time doesn't exist except on the West Coast. I would like to start this morning by talking about an absolute travesty, an absolute just complete and utter failure of the media to mention what is quite obviously one of the most important things in the history of histories. Okay? And that is that nobody is mentioning that Nebraska volleyball, one of the greatest programs in the history of college volleyball, went to Omaha the other night and beat Creighton, or or as Irish Swede calls them, my favorite team, 3-0 in Omaha. 3-0. Phone is continuing to buzz and vibrate. The score, I don't remember. Hold on. let me just expand that. 25-14, 25-22, and 25-16. Nobody is talking about this, and honestly, it may be one of the worst things in the history of sports. And there's a reason for this. And I don't care if I'm boring. I appreciate you being here because you help the algorithm. Thank you. No matter what you say and no matter what you do in here, you help the algorithm. More people are going to see this video. Mwah, thanks for being here. But the reason that this is so much of a travesty, and by the way, it's not like this has ever been like a close contest, but the reason this is a travesty is because you can see there you go. There's the score. And I think that, well, that's actually a score, but back in 2011, but I made that. Anyways, Nebraska and Creighton have played a few times, and Nebraska's never lost to the Jays. The Blue Jays, by the way. 20-0 since 1981, I think. I think the Blue Jays have only even won like 8 sets or something. And you got to win 3 to win. But one of the more amazing things about this is that during the game, Creighton had a hitting percentage of .053. How you measure hitting percentages is you take the amount of kills minus the amount of errors. So basically, if you look at 8 kills, they also had 5 errors, quick math, pretend like I'm doing math, that's 3, and you divide it by the amount of attacks, that TA. So basically, that comes out to .07 in that first set, .1 in the second set, and .026 in the third set. No, we don't have to talk about volleyball because as I'm checking, Creighton doesn't have any championships in volleyball. Sorry, your favorite team sucks. So does mine. .053. Not great, by the way. Not great. But the last time that Creighton hit that low was exactly 10 years ago. September 8th, 2011. This game was played 2 days ago on September 8th, 2021. Exactly 10 years ago. 10 years ago. In Lincoln, Creighton played Nebraska. And they lost, by the way, 3-0. Imagine that. But they also hit .053 in that match. So exactly 10 years ago, Nebraska and Creighton played. This was in Lincoln. But anyways, Nebraska and Creighton played. Nebraska swept Creighton. And the hitting percentage of Creighton was exactly the same as it was 2 days ago. If this doesn't, like, think of all of the things to where this has to line up to where it has to be the exact same day 10 years later. I don't think that people appreciate how just astronomically, mathematically unlikely this is. You're talking about playing somewhere of 30 some odd matches per season in 10 years, except for in 2020. In which the biggest travesty of 2020, as far as I understand, was that there wasn't basically a volleyball tournament. 2020 sucked. Anyways, I think Kentucky won. I did the research on this, by the way, the other night on my Samsung Galaxy Fold 3, laying next to Snoozin' Susan. Hey, frustrated atheists, please don't insult people like that. Thanks. Anyways, I just wanted to share that travesty with you folks. But moving on, my name is Nathaniel, and today is the first day in a series I'm titling I'm a Masochist and You're Welcome for Taking This Pain for You because it's completely harmful and it's probably detrimental to my mental and physical health. And we're covering the introduction of The Authoritarian Moment, written by Harvard law grad and bandmate of Cody Johnston. I do not know why that is happening. Anyways, in bandmate of Cody Johnston, Ben Shapiro, my bad, that's actually transphobe Gina Carano. I don't actually know how to say her name. But her, the transphobe, sitting right there. The lady that was once apparently in Star Wars and made it worse than, like, I don't know, Revenge of the Sith. Somehow it's worse than that. But she's being interviewed by this guy sitting right here, and his name is Ben Shapiro. And here he is, showing that he actually doesn't know how to dab. But seriously, he went to Harvard. And he writes books, like a lot of books, especially in the past few years. And that guy does not like Barack Obama. But he thinks about the end of America, which he considers the end of the world because America is the only country that exists here. And I believe John Green might agree with him, the green stuff of not America. Anyways, but he thinks about the end of the world a lot. He's like Olympus Has Fallen, except in a book form. And the end of the world is done by the terrorists known as the left. Anyways, back to his most recent book. A subtitle, How the Left, again, Weaponized America's Institutions Against Dissent. So that means something. I don't know what that even means. The left weaponized stuff against dissent, the institutions. Sure, I'm certain he'll tell us in the book. Anyways, I've said before, and I will say it again, I found all the 8s that I was hitting. There we go. And I will say this again, that Ben Shapiro is a liar. He's a lying liar of the liarth degree. Here's how I know. Here's how I know that he's a liar. His book was published by Broadside Books. Except that's not the broadside of a ship. That is what we call the bow of the ship. He lied about his book before the first sentence. Now, I actually give kudos to this lying because it's something people would pass by so quickly. But I noticed it, Ben. I noticed. Now, he begins the book, according to the institutional powers that be America is under authoritarian threat. Authoritarian threat. Now, I never thought that I would say this, but Ben is telling the truth. He is telling the truth without distortion. It is true that America is under authoritarian threat. Absolutely. We saw that this year and also like the rest of America all the time. All of the time. He says, and that authoritarian threat in this tiny graphic, according to those who control vast swaths of American life, manifested itself most prominently on January 6th, 2021. On that day, hundreds, if not thousands, of rioters broke away from a far larger group of pro-Trump peaceful protesters and stormed the United States Capitol, many seeking to do violent harm to members of Congress and the Vice President of the United States. And their goal to overturn the legally constituted results of the 2020 election. That's a tough word to say. Now, I don't know when he says, according to those who control vast swaths of American life. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that ban. I'm pretty certain that most everybody could see with their own eyes by watching the videos of those who were there doing an insurrection. We could tell as they insurrected that it was them with the insurrecting. It was conservatives. Those folks on the right doing the insurrecting, cheered on by the President of the United States, who said, as the insurrectionists were doing an insurrecting, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. Kudos for capitalizing Constitution, negated by the fact that country is capitalized. You almost made it there, Mr. Former somehow was a president that seriously was elect. Anyways, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. Also, he capitalized states. And therefore, if we do the math on this, let's see here, his attempts were 3. All right, you take 1 minus 2, you have a negative hitting percentage. Donald Trump's grammar is a negative hitting percentage. Now, I wish that there were a word to describe what that sounds like, what his tweet sounds like. I'm grasping here, and I can't think of the word that he is looking for. Something about trees in some season. I don't know. It's tough. It's not coming to me right now. I'll look it up and I'll get back to you on that. Anyways, he goes on to tell the treasonous insurrectionist criminals, or he calls Ben, by the way, calls them criminals. But he says this. But according to the left, the January 6th riots were merely an act of universal condemned criminality. They were the culmination of right-wing authoritarianism. I'm sorry. What, Ben? Universally condemned criminality? Like Josh Hawley doing this. How about Representative Paul Gosar tried to turn it into something that it wasn't by blaming Antifa? Or when Representative Mo Brooks said, I shit you not, there is some indication that fascist Antifa members were involved, that they embedded themselves within Trump protesters to appear to be Trump protesters. Or when Shannon Grove, the Republican leader in the California State Senate, tweeted, Patriots don't act like this, ! ×2. This was Antifa. Didn't even capitalize Antifa. Shame on you. A bit closer to home than that What about when Georgia Representative Andrew Clyde said calling it an insurrection was a bald-faced lie, and said that rioters, if you watched TV footage, looked more like, quote, a tourists. Yeah, we've seen the TV footage there, Representative Clyde, and we've also seen, again, their own Insta videos. Spoiler. They don't look like tourists. And Fox News has downplayed the insurrection time and again. And I have a lot that we could go on. A lot that we could go on. But there's links. You know the stories. Insurrecting. Anyways, notice also, and this is important, I think, that he wrote, broke away from a far larger group of pro-Trump peaceful protesters. That is true. But gosh, Ben, if I thought you were writing dishonestly because I think you're a dishonest person who likes to do a dishonest, I might think you're attempting to downplay the severity of an insurrection in which you yourself said hundreds, if not thousands, of rioters didn't call them Trump supporters or conservatives. That's interesting. I bet there's no footage of you calling BLM supporters liberals or supporters of Joe Biden, and there certainly aren't links to that found in this video's description, right? Tried to overthrow the government. But you're not dishonest, Ben. You're a stand-up guy. You went to Harvard Law, which again, kind of impressive. Now, I appreciate, by the way, that he gets and he gives examples of people on a hashtag the left saying things that are true as if they're somehow bad, including this quote by CNN's Don Lemon. He says, if you voted for Trump, you voted for the person who the Klan supported. You voted for the person who Nazis support. You voted for the person the alt-right supports. Remember when they used to call Nazis the alt-right? way to downplay that. That's the crowd you are in. You voted for the person who incited a crowd to go into the Capitol and potentially take the lives of lawmakers. Is you including Don Lemon's quote supposed to be some sort of gotcha? Because I don't see it. He says things which are facts. But you, Mr. Shapiro, you say things that aren't facts. Indeed. This is you in your book. The American left argued the greatest threat to America's future came from right-wing authoritarianism, which naturally the left conflated with white supremacy and conservative philosophy. Philosophy, by the way, is this thing that you it's a class you take in college and not anywhere else. It's kind of like this other type of class that you take. It's almost like Ben would know what it was because he went to law school, and I can't. Again, I'm just horrible this morning with remembering names of things. It has to do with crittering or it's up here. I don't know. It's somewhere in the brain. Now, let me also point out that white supremacy is a threat to democracy. This is something that is true, by the way. You know, it's maybe we should think about the end of that one time that we forced people to no longer own enslaved people, and then we were like, hey, let's do this whole rebuilding thing, something about constructing everything. And then white people were like, we like white things on top of our white clothing, and basically did a threat to democracy. It isn't my fault. The people who tried to, again, and this should be noted, overthrow the government, consider themselves conservative. Now that, by the way, is actually where I take a bit of offense. They consider themselves conservative. But I know a tiny number of them are all about small government, very few of them are about small government or any of the other conservative ideals. What better way to show their love of government than cheering when state officials in Florida and Texas ban mask mandates in any cities, school districts, or private businesses? Super duper small government. Or how about when Texas banned abortions across the state? That's still a thing. Or how they want a constitutional amendment which forces people to stand for the national anthem. Yeah, not really small government. People who think you like Hamilton until you find out the only white people they cast are the bad guys. Now, conservative stuff is one thing. Today's Republicans, by and large, are not conservative. Except maybe Ted Cruz. He wants the government to be so hands-off that he took a vacation to Cancun as his state's infrastructure was failing. That is small government conservatism. That is like, it's almost like he didn't want to exist. Conservatism. Ben then asks, cool, either way, what if, in fact, the most pressing authoritarian threat to the country lies precisely with the institutional powers that be in the well-respected centers of journalism, in the gleaming towers of academia? He went to Harvard. In the glossy offices of the Hollywood glitterati, in the cubicles of Silicon Valley, in the boardrooms of our corporate behemoths. I need to remind Ben where he lives and where he records. What if the danger of authoritarianism in reality lies with those who are most powerful, like a president, with a ruling class that despises the values of half the country? Oh. And with the institutions they wield, what if the creeping authoritarianism of those who wield power has been slowly growing unchecked for years? It's almost like they took all of that and put a wedge in it. I don't know. Wedging. What if authoritarianism has many strains? And the most virulent strain isn't the paranoia. It's like different variants of strains of viruses. And fear that sometimes manifests on the right, but the self-assured, unearned moral virtue of the left. Ben, you aren't Marvel. You don't get to what if all this stuff. Also, Disney doesn't want you. And additionally, What If is a really good show. I recommend it. But he then begins to speak about the next little subsection called the authoritarian instinct, which of course begins with the verse from the Bible. All right, Ben is Jewish, so this makes sense. He breaks it down. God tells Samuel that the people have rejected me. Samuel excoriates the people, telling them that a king, quote, will take your sons and take your daughters and take your fields and your vineyards and take the tenth of your flocks, that in the end you shall be his servants, and you shall cry out in that day because of the king you chose, and the Lord will not answer you in that day. And the people answer, no, there shall be a king over us, that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. I, by the way, appreciate the reference, the biblical, the number 8 there, Ben, because, while non-theists like to say they're super smart about the Bible, most aren't. Now, I do appreciate his choice here. I do. Because if you want to find some authoritarian stuff, I don't know if you can find a better example than in the best-selling book of all time, the Bible. He says human beings All too often, trust not in the moral authority of a God above, looking down benevolently on humanity, providing ethical guidelines for building fulfilling lives and a rich community. I'm I'm sorry, Ben, but your next sentences say instead they look to the earthly authority. I need to really put my phone in do not disturb mode. This seems important. You said instead they look to an earthly authority of a king, a leader, an institution. It took just weeks from the splitting of the Red Sea for the Jews to embrace the golden calf. And you actually say it right there. If there's anything, if there is anything or any being that's an authoritarian, it's the God of the Bible, who literally gave you 10 commandments, which he murdered people who didn't follow them. Now, he goes on to talk about the founding of America, which he will do. Again, he's obsessed with America and the founding of America. Pretty much all of his books are about that, and that's why America is so awesome and exceptional. He mentions James Madison. They always mention James Madison, like every time. But for whatever reason, they don't mention Hercules Mulligan, and I don't get it. Now, I'm certain when he said the founding fathers were, quote, united in their support. Sure, I got that. There it is. United in their support in a culture of freedom. Ben forgot about Arlen Parsa's brilliant usage. I missed it. I don't know why it's not in there. Either way, Arlen Parsa's brilliant usage of John Trumbull's painting of those founding fathers who signed the Declaration of Independence. Just 13 of the 56 signers did not own enslaved people, and only 8 of those freed each of them. John Hancock's signature is the most well known on the document regarding independence, something the enslaved people confined to his property may have taken issue with. Patrick Henry, who did not sign the Declaration but was on July 5th, 1776, elected Virginia's first governor, famously yelled, "Give me liberty or give me death," and wrote that slavery was, quote, inconsistent with the Bible and destructive to morality. But I wonder how the 80 enslaved people forced to work on his land felt about his liberty and his views of morality. I won't get started on Jefferson or how their culture viewed women or First Nation indigenous peoples. So, culture of freedom, I guess, as long as you're a white landowner. Ben, he then goes on and references a 1950 paper entitled The Authoritarian Personality. You know, I'm just saying. Either way, The Authoritarian Personality, a book studying the origins of anti-Semitism and fascistic personalities written by Theodore Adorno, Else Frankel Brunswick, Daniel Levinson, and Nevitt Sanford. He then says Adorno, because he was a Marxist, completely ignores the fact that left-wing authoritarianism even exists because he says they, quote, loaded the questions. And sure, the book has some issues, one of them being that they interviewed only white people, but the book is a tome. It's nearly 1,000 pages. And as it turns out, Adorno only wrote part of it. Like just over 100 pages, so a tenth of the book. Were the rest of the authors the same as Adorno? Were they? They were not. They were not the same. Crazy, I know. He then goes on to mention an article talking about a psychologist from the University of Montana. They beat Washington this past weekend, named Lucian Conway. He forgot the third, anyways. And his 2017 paper, Finding the Loch Ness Monster, Left-Wing Authoritarianism in the United States. Yeah, so left-wing authoritarianism is not the Loch Ness Monster. It does exist. I know it does. I know it does. But let's look at Ben's source for this this material that he referenced, the Finding the Loch Ness Monster, Left-Wing Authoritarianism in the United States, which, as you can see, was written in 2017. Who wrote? This is what it's called, Tracking Down the Elusive Left-Wing Authoritarian. It's at reason.com. Left-wing authoritarianism can be just as prejudiced, dogmatic, and extremist as right-wing authoritarianism. This is actually Ben's source in the book, is this article from reason.com. Now, the paper, written by Ronald Bailey, recognize the name. Check Google for this one. There he is. He's a libertarian, an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, which, as it turns out, is a libertarian think tank founded and funded by the Koch brothers. Well, Koch brother. And Bailey has railed against climate change, but now has kind of changed his stance. But I'm certain his followers really haven't caught on to that. And I bet that this guy is super duper non-biased. That, folks, is called poisoning the well. Now, it doesn't mean that he can't write a non-biased article for reason.com, a libertarian website, reminded, but let's read it anyway. He writes and says that Conway found, quote, our data suggests that average Americans on the political left are just as likely to be dogmatic as authoritarians as those on the political right. And those left-wing authoritarians can be just as prejudiced, dogmatic, and extremist as right-wing authoritarians. And he told this to SciPost. And then Bailey, in his next sentence, says, what is surprising about this, make it a little bigger, what is surprising about this, in that these results are apparently so surprising to many social scientists? After all, what is political correctness other than conforming to established authorities and adhering to conventional social norms with respect to issues like racial, gender, and income inequality, environmental problems, abortion, hate speech, and gun rights, while exhibiting hostility to folks who flout them? That sounds like a super duper not at all opinion of reason.com. And that's actually the end of that article at reason.com. But did Professor Conway actually sit down with Bailey? As it turns out, no. Now, it's not like Bailey and Shapiro, Ben and Ben, BB, would be dishonest in their writings, right? Right? Well, let's check his source, which again comes from a January 31st, 2018 article in SciPost. And yes, Conway does say what is quoted. But then in the very next sentence, he says this: our two studies should be viewed as just an opening foray in what we hope is to be a lot more research on the topic. We are not claiming definitively that left-wingers are just as likely as right-wingers to be authoritarian in all or even most contexts, or that left-wing authoritarians are just the same as right-wing authoritarians in every regard. In fact, I'm pretty sure they are not. And we are doing some work on that. There are good reasons to think authoritarianism aligns more with right wing than left wing ideology, and we are interested in those reasons. The point is, it is a further question to better define the similarities and differences in right wing and left wing authoritarianism. Just gonna, just give me a quick drink of, mm, mm, mm. Oh, again. Oh, this coffee. Mm. Well, that's interesting. Now, Ben, you wouldn't be dishonest with your reporting and your source material, would you? And you wouldn't not link to the original article, would you? Ben, spoiler is that no, he did not. But I have the paper. I have it. Strange. I I I know it's strange that I have that. The article in SciPost also helps to point out the differences between left-wing authoritarianism and right-wing authoritarianism. As an example will illustrate, an item from the standard right wing authoritarianism scale reads, "It's always better to trust the judgment of the proper authorities in government and religion than to listen to the noisy rabble rousers in our society who are trying to create doubts in people's minds." And that's what you would get if you were taking the right wing authoritarianism scale or the survey for that. For the left wing authoritarianism scale, here's a question. It's always better to trust the judgment of the proper authorities in science with respect to issues like global warming and evolution than to listen to the noisy rabble rousers in our society who are trying to create doubt in people's minds. That is a question regarding left wing authoritarianism. And if you answer, by the way, it's a scale. It's called the F scale, the fascistic scale from 1 to 5. If you answer that in the affirmative, you're considered an authoritarian on the left wing. I suppose that I'm an authoritarian on the left wing because I would say that it's better to listen to the scientists who are the experts when it comes to things like climate change and evolution and those types of things. Or, if you will, I don't know, vaccines, than it is to listen to the noisy rabble rousers in our society who are trying to create doubt in people's minds. This is an inherently different question than what we see with the right wing authoritarianism, who asks specifically about religion. Those who are religious pursue or what some do, a theocratic type of government, which is historically not a good idea and doesn't align exactly with democracy. In the left wing authoritarian condition, these items pertain to their attitudes toward the liberal focused statement global warming is occurring and is human caused. And a subset of the participants in the right wing authoritarianism condition said these items pertain to their attitudes toward, quote, conservative focused statements Christianity is absolutely true. You want to say, Ben, that the questions were loaded, but this left wing authoritarianism scale is an inherently, as I've mentioned, different type of question. We have the actual scientific evidence that anthropogenic climate change is a real thing. But to say that Christianity is absolutely true is something that cannot be scientifically verified. Sorry, apologists, you know this is true. I don't care that you believe it. You know that anthropogenic climate change, it is a real thing. Conway says, first, And this is important. We are not claiming that there are equal numbers of authoritarians among both liberals and conservatives. At this point, we simply do not have enough data to know the answer to that question for certain. But we agree with Jost et al. From 2003 paper that there are reasons to expect authoritarianism to appear more frequently on the right than on the left. This is important because Ben, in his book, quotes and says that on the left wing authoritarianism scale, left wing or liberal ideology scored the highest. Yeah, Ben, it would, because the questions are aimed toward liberals. Imagine that. Maybe Ben is trying to get him to say something that he isn't actually saying. Maybe context matters. Maybe the left isn't the same or even more authoritarian as he stated than the right. Now that's an interesting concept, considering in Ben's book it says that it's more authoritarian, that the powers that be are wrong. He makes it seem like they're lying. Some of them are, by the way. But additionally, Ben should have looked into newer papers, because I did, and I found them, like this one. Oh, my apologies, I missed this. Conway says in his newest paper, which was written in December of 2020, around the same time that college volleyball was basically not being played again, the greatest travesty of the past year. We pause to note that if this were true, that it's only an ideology, as a measurement of liberalism, the left wing authoritarian scale would paint an excessively unflattering portrait of liberals. Basically, what Ben is saying. A portrait that would go against much theorizing about liberalism. Fortunately, our own data suggests this is not true. And thus, the scale can rather be viewed as a measurement of a particular kind of liberal and not a more general measurement of liberalism. That is interesting. And that is from a 2020 paper. Here's another one from 2020. Where it was shall be, lessons from the authoritarian personality for Trump's America. Amy Busby at Arkansas State University. Or this. The two dimensions of narcissistic personality and support for the radical right, the role of right-wing authoritarianism, social dominance orientation, and anti-immigrant sentiment. Written again in 2020. Just like Conway's newest paper. It's like, sheesh, Ben. I kind of feel like you need to do to be a bit more honest in your citations and who you reference, and do more research for your stuff. That way it doesn't seem like you're being, again, dishonest in your source material and what you're writing, and it seems like you're pandering to a particular base instead of actually just telling people what, instead of actually giving facts and stuff like that. I realize that doing this stuff and being honest is a new thing for you. It's a new concept. But I can assure you it will help with getting your wife. I'm not going to do that. Because it's honestly, it is insult. I think that Ben is wrong regarding his ideas of of sex. I think that he is wrong, but I'm not going to bring his wife into this because I'm a better person than he is. But that is enough for today. I think that we can all agree we've had enough of Ben Shapiro on us. We need to go and take a shower, a Ben Shapiro removing shower. There's more. This is introduction part 1. There is more. And that's for another time. Maybe next week. If you're watching this in the future, then it was like next week now, and welcome back to the future or something. Should be a movie. Anyways, I am, as always, honored and humbled that you have watched this video. I don't usually ask for folks to go in and like and subscribe and all of that cool stuff, but it really helps us out when you do, because it's not easy to read Ben Shapiro's books, and it's really, really, really tough sometimes to create some of this stuff and bring in some of the humorous stuff that we try to bring into this. And producing content is a time. It takes a lot of time to do that. So uh, if you wouldn't mind doing that, we would be incredibly appreciative. We also have a patreon.com/divine disbelief where you can give us like $1 a month. Take your your slave owning first president who did not free his slaves, or the enslaved people in his that he had on Mount Vernon when he died. Take that guy. You don't want him in your life anyways, do you? You don't. Neither do we, but we know how to properly take care of that nonsense. So you can just give it to us. Take it off of your shoulders and give it to us. We will ensure that every single one of those that we spend, people know. Thank you so much for watching. And we'll we'll see you next time. Look, I'm wearing my corgi shirt today. Don't hate, roller skate.